All right, now let's move on to our next topic, which is the 5-number summary and the box plot. The 5-number summary is a list of 5 values that captures key points that describe the spread of the data and the center of the data, and it also helps us build what's called a box plot. So here's what the list of values are. We have the minimum value in your data set. That's the first number. The second number is called the first quartile, which is also sometimes called the lower quartile. And that is the 25th percentile. So you might also see it written like this, since it's the 25th percentile. So it could be written as Q1 or P25. The third number is called the median, and that is the 50th percentile, which can be written as Q2, or you might also see it as P50. The fourth number in the 5-number summary is called the third quartile, which sometimes is called the upper quartile, which is Q3, and that's the 75th percentile. So you might also see it written like this. And then the last number in the 5-number summary is the maximum value of all the data values. So we have in the 5-number summary, we have the minimum and the maximum value. These 3 values here are called the quartiles because these are the percentiles that break up the data into 4 parts, right? The 25th percentile, then the 50th percentile, then the 75th percentile, and then all of the data, the 100th percentile. So that's why these are called the quartiles. So think of them as the quarters of the data. Now, the box plot, this is a graph that shows the 5-number summary. Now, let me show you what this will look like. Now, it won't always look exactly like this, but it will have the same characteristics. So when you have a box plot, you have a box or a rectangle, and that rectangle shows us where Q1, which is the lower quartile or the 25th percentile, lies, and then Q3, which is the upper or the third quartile or the 75th percentile. So the box always goes between Q1 and Q3. Then you have the median, which is a bar that goes down the middle of the box. So wherever that bar is, that is your median or your 50th percentile. And then we have what's called the whiskers, which is what comes out in either direction to the minimum and the maximum value. So the whisker coming out to the left will show where the minimum value is, and the whisker coming out to the right will show where the maximum value is. Now, because the box plot is broken up using the 5-number summary, which breaks it up into its quarters, I know that each part of that box represents 25% of the data. So whatever the minimum value is up to Q1, this distance between the minimum and Q1 has approximately 25% of the data. Then between Q1 and the median, that's approximately 25% of the data. From the median to Q3, that holds approximately 25% of the data. And then from Q3 to the maximum value, that holds about 25% of the data. So each area of this box plot shows us a quarter of the data. Let's look at the first example. A tech company records the number of support tickets resolved daily. Here's the data for 15 days. The first step, we're going to find the 5-number summary, and this we can do very quickly on GeoGebra. So let's switch over to GeoGebra. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to enter the data for the tech company records. into one of our spreadsheet columns. Pause the video for a moment and make sure you get that data in your spreadsheet. Once you get your data in the spreadsheet, highlight your data and come over here to where the it looks like a bar graph, and click on that icon and choose one variable analysis. This is where we were looking at the histograms before, but we can find the 5-number summary from this as well. Once you click your analysis button, then click this button here. This is Sigma X. If you click that, that's just the icon for finding the statistics for this data set. I'm going to click on that, and then you'll have a list of information about this data set. So you'll see at the very top, you have N, which is the sample size. So we have 15 data values. We have the mean, which is 39.8667, which we'll talk about that later in another lesson. Then we have the standard deviation, sigma and S. We have some other information, but when you get down to the bottom, you'll see the 5-number summary. From the data, you'll see the minimum value is 30. The first or lower quartile is 36. So in this data set, 25% of the data is less than 36. Here is the median, which is the 50th percentile. So that means about half the data is less than 40. Then we have our Q3, which means about 75% of the data is less than 44. And then here is our maximum value. So this is our 5-number summary. So we have our 5-number summary that we found from GeoGebra. The minimum and maximum are easy to spot as long as the data set's somewhat small. So those are easy, but Q1, that was 36. Then our Q2, which can also be labeled as the median, that was 40. Then we have our Q3, which is our 75th percentile, is 44. And then we have our maximum value in the data set, which is 48. All right, now in part B, we're going to use this to create a box plot so we can see how to do this. So we're going to make a number line. Our smallest is 30 and our max is 48. So I'm going to go from like 25 to 50. I'm going to start at 25. Let's go by 5s. Okay, so there's our number line. We want to draw the box. If we look back up here, the box is going to be drawn where we see Q1 to Q3. So Q1 is at 36. So that's a little bit past 35. I'm going to draw the side of my box there. And then Q3 is 44. So I'm going to draw the other side of my box there. So here's my box from Q1 to Q3. The median is at 40. So that's where I'm going to draw my line down the middle of the box. And then my whiskers come out to the minimum and the maximum in each direction. So here is my minimum value. So that's one whisker that comes out that way. And then my maximum value is 48. So that's about right here. So that's going to come out to 48. So here's my minimum value. This is my Q1. Here's my Q2 or my median. Here's my Q3 and my maximum. And now I can see the way that it's broken up into 25% parts. So from here to here, between 30 and 36 is about 25% of the data. Between 36 and 40, that's our Q1 and Q2, that's about 25% of the data. And between 40 and 44, 44 is about 25% of the data. And then from 44 out to the maximum value, between those two values is about 25% of the data. Now, the IQR, that is shorthand for interquartile range. And that is listed right here. The interquartile range tells us the length of the box. So how wide, or what is the distance between Q1 and Q3? So to find the interquartile range, we take Q3 minus Q1, which in this case would be 44 minus 36. And so that's going to give us 8. So our interquartile range here is 8. Now that's going to play a part in the next topic that we're going to talk about for outliers. So this is going to be necessary to know to find outliers. Okay, so using the box plot that we drew up here, approximately what percent of values are above and below 36? So 36 is the first quartile. So let me pick a different color here. I'll choose yellow. So here's Q1 right here. That's 36. That means approximately, because 36 is Q1, 25% of the data lies below 36, which means approximately 75% of the data in the data set lies above 36, right? Because from here to here is 25%. So 36 and less is about 25%. And this is 25% from Q1 to Q2. This is 25%, and this is 25%. So when I add up all the 25%, everything above 36 would be approximately 75%.